Have you noticed that lately the online audience receives news about Zack Snyder as a mockery? I personally feel that every social media post that has to do with him, regardless of the topic, has a considerable percentage of interactions from people who are happy to see him fail. Because, let's be honest, he has failed quite a bit in the latest movies. Or comments stating that Snyder is the worst thing that could have happened to superhero cinema. Although I feel that many of these comments are not really motivated precisely by a hate for Snyder or his work, but because, let's face it, there is a sector of fans that are truly unbearable and criticize any DC product that is not from the director. Are you one of those, Dad? No, I'm a fan of Snyder, but I also try to talk about his failures, and at the same time I'm excited about the new DC projects. Everyone is now objective. The director's career appears to be facing challenges currently. Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon and Army of the Dead universes developed with Netflix were recently cancelled, coinciding with negative social media reactions to news about the director. Is this the lowest point in Zack Snyder's career? We'll discuss this in a more casual, opinion-based video. That's why I'm on a different set. And we will use the graphic resource of the Doomsday clock to find out how close or far Zack Snyder's career has been. From the labor apocalypse at various points in his career, including the current stage. Let's get started. Subscribe. Hey, but before we continue, I want to tell you that on February 22nd, I will be having a talk in Mexico City about the history of Superman. It will be a talk where I will tell you how the character was created, his connection with the sun gods, and how has it evolved over the years. Both in the comics and in the movies. After the talk, the idea is to stay there at the place, to hang out, to take pictures with me. Subscribe. For this weekend of love and friendship, I've included a discounted link in the description for you and a friend or partner to enjoy. If it's with one, these are good friends, and if it's with your partner, honestly, I can't imagine a more romantic date than a talk about the history of Superman, can you? For other questions or to pay at OXXO by transfer, email me and I'll explain how. We've sold 80% of the tickets, so if interested, take advantage of this promotion. Let's continue with the topic. Here are a couple of important concepts before we start today's discussion. The Doomsday Clock is a symbol created by the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists in 1947. How close is humanity to total destruction from threats like nuclear war or climate change? Scientists adjust the clock's hands based on the situation, with midnight symbolizing the world's end. The concept was explored in Alan Moore's Watchmen story through symbols, which Zack Snyder adapted to film. These events lead to a major worldwide disaster. In this video, midnight symbolizes the end of Zack Snyder's career. Let's begin. One could say that Zack Snyder's film career began when he directed the movie Dawn of the Dead, a remake of the classic zombie film from the 70s. This movie was very important in his career because it became a commercial success that did yield good profits, which made the studios trust him. So Snyder was able to sell Warner Brothers the idea to create the movie 300, which would be based on the comic of the same name written by Frank Miller. Snyder's reputation was so good that he convinced a big studio to make a movie they hadn't even considered. This tells us that at this point his career was far from midnight, that is, far from the apocalypse. However, the studio soon began to have doubts. Upon learning the story of the comic 300, Warner thought that Snyder would shoot the scenes at some location in Greece, but Snyder had other plans. Shooting the entire movie in front of a green screen to give it an aesthetic very similar to that of the comic, Warner initially did not entirely agree, which made the clock move forward a bit. Snyder shot a small sample of his vision for the film. The executives saw it, decided to trust him, and in the end things turned out very well for everyone as the movie became a commercial success, grossing 7 times its budget. Moreover, it established for the first time the distinctive style that we would later know from Snyder. With non-slow motion shots, saturated filters, and completely controlled spaces from the use of the green screen, the clock then was further from midnight than ever before. Executives saw the success of 300 and realized there was potential profit in non-mainstream superhero comics. Virgins have more money because they don't spend it on girlfriends. They claim to be virgins by choice. Is that really true? Yes, but not their choice. The point is that Snyder was given a good budget to film the Watchmen tape, which unfortunately did not perform as expected at the box office. While there were mixed comments from critics, what did the general public say? Look, I mainly heard 2 types of comments. Many fans believe Zack Snyder's Watchmen successfully adapted material thought to be unadaptable, while others believe it alters some essential qualities of the original work. For instance, it's accused of excessively glorifying violence and romanticizing Rorschach's character. It's a movie I really like. I've never met anyone who flat out doesn't like it. Do you think such a person exists? Well, yes, I mean, there are people who don't like guacamole. What can I tell you? After that, Snyder had two back-to-back critical and commercial failures with Guardians of Ga'Hoole and Sucker Punch. All these elements made the clock move closer to midnight. Christopher Nolan then proposed him to direct Man of Steel and set the direction for the extended DC universe. After 3 consecutive commercial failures, let me explain. It's true that when Zack Snyder began directing Man of Steel, he had 3 consecutive box office failures: Watchmen, Guardians of Ga'Hoole, and Sucker Punch. Why was he chosen to oversee C's extended universe? We must remember it was a different era, prior to the math and the tremendous rise of digital platforms, which meant that a good portion of a movie's revenue came from digital versatile disc and Blu-ray sales. Considering this, Snyder's numbers were quite decent. Back then, 300 grossed 7 times its budget. 300 grossed 7 times its budget. Watchmen underperformed at the box office but had strong physical sales via its original director's cut and ultimate versions. Warner released the latest cut without Snyder's involvement, seeing it as a good business decision. Greg Silverman, former Warner Brothers president, recently confirmed this when a fan asked the same question. We lost some money on Ga'Hoole and quite a bit on Sucker Punch. The rest of his Warner Brothers movies were very profitable. He had a lot of support, including that of the acclaimed director Christopher Nolan. He was known for his comic book knowledge from past work, which tells us that, all things considered, Snyder, before Man of Steel, still enjoyed a good reputation. Things got complicated with Man of Steel. Man of Steel is one of those movies that was always on the edge. On the critics' side, it's just a tad away from being considered fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. On the box office side, it was just a tad away from tripling its budget, which is usually when a movie is said to be a commercial success. We can call it a success, especially since Snyder sold well in physical format. But perhaps it wasn't the billion-dollar success the company was hoping for from such a big character like Superman. Especially when lesser-known superheroes like Iron Man were achieving those numbers. The reception was mixed and controversial among fans, with opinions ranging from love to hate and everything in between. In my opinion, this movie brought Snyder closer to midnight because he was not able to achieve the great critical and commercial acceptance that Warner wanted. Greg Silverman's tweet revealed that despite the controversy, Snyder's films were profitable, leading to the decision to give him another opportunity. This new opportunity to show Warner Brothers that he was the right one to direct the DC Extended Universe came with the movie Batman v Superman. What can I tell you about that movie? Did you get to experience the Batman and Superman phenomenon? Keep in mind that it's almost 10 years since the movie's promotion, where fans got excited about the trailer with the red capes. Gal Gadot premiered as Wonder Woman at Comic-Con. The trailer received hate. Doomsday does not appear in the information provided. Yes, it essentially revealed the entire plot. Despite the hype, the movie's poor reviews days before its premiere caused everything to fall apart. Most of the reviews said it was a terrible movie, and social media was flooded with comments for and against a film that most of us hadn't seen. When it finally premiered in theaters, it was basically the same, lots of comments for and against. A video shows Ben Affleck's near real-time reaction to the movie's criticism, and this was probably the moment when the extended universe died. Even though it did have some good movies afterwards, like Wonder Woman. It feels really weird to think that the movie has been released for almost 10 years, and 10 years of my dad defending it. Do you remember that time? Tell me in the comments. In my opinion, Zack Snyder got closer than ever to midnight, at least until that point. You think it's worse now? Let's move on. Batman v Superman was a box office hit, but the poor reception from critics and many fans prompted Warner to immediately reconsider their approach. Had he given control to the wrong person? The issue is that Zack Snyder was already involved in the Justice League film production. They faced 2 choices: persist on an unfruitful path or remove Snyder from his position, which would result in Warner receiving hate from a sector of the fans, and also it would make them look bad for having hired the wrong person. But all this drama took a backseat when Zack Snyder's daughter Autumn took her own life. This, along with the problem Snyder was having with the studio, led him to leave the production, leaving the movie in the hands of Joss Whedon. I hate you, Joss Whedon. I hate you. Hey, it's the first I hate you, Joss Whedon, that you've done in this house. Shocked. Yes, but I say it every day before I go to sleep. His film was so terrible that for the next 3 years, many people began to wonder what would have happened if Zack Snyder hadn't stepped away from the project. Many of Snyder's social media posts, and I really mean many, made people ask for the so-called Snyder Cut, which they initially said didn't exist, that it would never come out, and well, it did come out. My dad lit a candle daily to Zack Snyder to make the small miracle occur. The movie didn't generate significant profits as it skipped theaters and launched directly on Warner's new platform, Home Box Office. However, it provided a unique perspective on Zack Snyder's capabilities as a filmmaker. This superhero movie is great, with epic moments, emotional scenes, and a simple message that resonates better with the audience than Snyder's more complex works. It wasn't a commercial success, but I believe it was well received within the geek community, not only due to the film but also the narrative that unfolded behind the scenes. Where Snyder, after years of trying, was able to launch his vision of the Justice League. In fact, even people who were anti-Snyder on this occasion said something like, "Hey, yes, he really did do well, didn't he?" This caused Snyder to move quite far from midnight on the Doomsday clock. In fact, if you search on social media for posts from 2020 related to his next project, the zombie film Army of the Dead, the public's reaction to the film was quite different from today's perspective. How did it perform? Overall, it had a positive response from fans and critics, especially considering that critics and Snyder don't get along very well. According to Nielsen, the show held the top spot in viewership for several weeks. Note that Nielsen ratings can be misleading. The only ones who really know how a series or streaming movie did are the platforms themselves. They review the information and decide whether to proceed with more franchise projects or cancel everything. Netflix released an Army of the Dead prequel and considered expanding the universe with a possible sequel and animated series. Several reports suggest that Snyder's future plans have likely been cancelled due to the failure of his upcoming project Rebel Moon. When Rebel Moon was announced, Snyder was still enjoying the good reputation from the Snyder Cut and Army of the Dead. And many people wanted to see what the director would do with a Star Wars type franchise, and the result was... Look, I think this is the first time I'm going to give my personal opinion of the movie in public, Rebel Moon. I thought it was terrible, even after seeing it at a special event where I met ZACK SNYDER. He signed my Watchmen comic and I had a great time, but, well, I didn't like the movie. I think Rebel Moon 2 was even worse. I really can't believe how bad both movies are. I don't usually do reviews. Occasionally, I briefly mention if I liked or disliked something, but I don't go into detail. It's not a review as such. I rather look for themes that are interesting within the movies and talk about them. So I usually don't have to deal with the execution of the movie. In this case, I really felt the hate towards Snyder, and the truth is that I didn't want to join in on that. It's like everyone was already kicking him and they didn't need me kicking him too, right? I didn't say it was good, that I liked it or recommend it. Instead, I kept a respectful silence. And when it was my turn to make a video about Rebel Moon, I preferred to talk about other things. Like in this case, the concept of the hero that Snyder has and also presented in the movie Rebel Moon. However, the audience took another path, and in my opinion, Snyder is closer than ever to midnight. Snyder is even closer to his fans after the Batman v Superman premiere, likely due to his strong fandom. Zack Snyder appears to have positive relationships with his cast members and doesn't mistreat anyone. He seems to be a decent person. And look, I got to see him up close, and he was very kind to the fans. He took the time to answer questions. He signed everything. While it may be part of his job to promote the movie, not all celebrities are as nice as he is, even in similar situations. Meanwhile, the fans I mentioned criticize every facet of the new Superman film and its universe. And look, there are things to criticize. I dislike Guy Gardner's appearance despite it being a comic replica. Creature Commandos also felt disappointing to me. But to say that the movie will be terrible because I didn't like the suit, I think there's a big difference. This prompts another fan group to react similarly, disparaging all of Snyder's work. Just because, which brought us to this point. Notice the phenomenon being experienced. For the public, Zack Snyder seems to be as good or as bad as his last movie, when Batman v Superman was released. Zack Snyder is the worst superhero director in the history of cinema. The release of the Snyder Cut confirmed its supporters' belief that Snyder was saving superhero cinema. This marked the start of a positive trend. He continued with Army of the Dead, which we can notice in the public's reaction from 2020 to 2021. But after Rebel Moon, I told you, Zack Snyder has never done anything good. It's as if the director's career is trapped between two groups of fundamentalist fans. People either love him unconditionally or hate him without acknowledging his merits. The strength of each position varies based on his most recent film release. Which tells us that today, after Rebel Moon, Zack Snyder is at a low point in his career. But he might still release a good movie later, prompting his initial fans to say, "We told you so." Zack Snyder has always made very big movies for very small minds, so I think one word defines Snyder's career. Don't leave yet. If you like this video, I'll leave you with these other videos I have about Snyder's cinema. Remember, my talk on Superman's history is on February 22nd in Mexico City. Details are in the description. Email me if you have questions. That's it for now. I'm Go, the Geek Monitor. Keep looking beyond the obvious.